Hello there, folks. Welcome. Good to see you. You may have noticed that there's somebody else in the room with us today, and we're delighted to welcome Paul Whitewick to the show. Basically, the reason that Paul is with us is that he makes brilliant and entertaining short YouTube films about the history, archaeology, and prehistory of Britain. And we thought, well, between the three of us, we've got loads to share with you lot out there. I think that's about sums it up, doesn't it, Rupert? That's about
it. Does really. It does. I mean, we really enjoy your films, so it's kind of a bit overdue, really. Because and also very impressive that you've got 165,000 subscribers. So you must be doing something right.
Apparently so, yeah. Apparently so. I don't know how it happens. It just kind of happens, but it's genuinely, gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to be kind of sat between you. As a long time fan of you and your work, and long time patron, I think, as well. So it's a pleasure to be a genuine.
We appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
We certainly do. Yeah. So a little bit more background, Paul, before we kick off. Explain, in your own terms, what brought you here, how you got here, because YouTube isn't the obvious career path, is it?
No, it's not. I think, sort of ever since I was trying to sort of work out my sort of journey to where we are now, sort of from an early age. And I think when I was a kid, we used to just sort of pull out the local OS map, and sort of me and a group of friends would just find something that looked a bit weird on a map and just cycle there. And we never really sort of tried to understand what we were looking at. We just saw something that said earthwork or something random on a map, something that looked curious and obscure, cycled there, looked at it and went, okay, cycled home again. And I it's kind of in a weird way that's kind of just stuck for me, but never really sort of left. It's just been there in the background of the question mark over curious bits in the landscape. And I come from a little bit of a railway family as well. And so sort of 8 or 9 years ago or so, we were just sort of watching some random YouTube videos that we liked about current railways. And I just thought, I wonder what it'd be like to make a film. And we just thought, let's go and explore sort of a disused railway. Because sort of the marrying between my love of sort of old maps and looking at lumps and bumps in the landscape and sort of the family railway history sort of, was still there. And me and my wife, Rebecca, we just sort of started exploring abandoned railways. And we had no agenda. We just, I guess you could say we made vlogs, pointing at things, going, oh, look at this bridge, look at this tunnel, look at this, what it was. And we just really enjoyed the process. We really enjoyed every sort of part of making the first film we made. Yeah. And we just said, oh, let's do it again. And sort of a week later, it became addictive. And it all of a sudden, we kind of just were in this, oh, well, let's do another one next week. Where could we go now? Okay, well, let's go and have a look at this and this and this. And we just didn't stop. And we even sort of after a year of posting weekly videos, we just didn't sort of stop for breath and to stop to sort of, I don't know, what's the phrase? Too busy chopping down the trees to sharpen the axe. And we were just putting videos out over and over and over. And then it became sort of, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, we sort of turned things into, do you know what? We like other bits of history. We like other aspects of history, a lot of question marks. And we just sort of started with the remit of, if it's interesting to us and we want to learn about the thing, whatever the thing be, I guess a few other people might like that too. And we don't ever want to come across like we're historians, we know all about this thing. We want to come across as if we're learning with you as well. And I guess now the remit of the channel is, if it's interesting and it's to do with the landscape because that's our love, then we'll try and learn about it and make a film as we go. And that's kind of where we are now, I guess.
I think there's a huge lesson for other YouTubers in that, just following what you love. But what a blessed relationship to have off the bat there. We are both, you and your wife, Rebecca, are working, and loving doing the same thing. That is totally blessed, that is, Paul. Yeah,
it's evolved. I think it's evolved over time in terms of what we do, but it's a great thing that we sort of shared. a really kind of good hobby that we shared, and it's turned into what it's turned into today. But it's and thankfully it still remains really enjoyable. Sort of every aspect. I don't sort of sit down and look at the edit and go, oh god, goodness me. I still look at the edit, a fresh blank timeline, as you guys do, I'm sure. You look at the blank timeline, and you just, I'm sort of, oh, okay, where do we start? I love that bit, which is great. I can see Michael, your eyes lighting up when I say that, because you know what it's like. You know, and I still like all those different aspects: the planning, the research, the going there. It's a great thing to do, and it's enjoyable. And here we are.
So when you're kicking off something right at the beginning, so how do you pick and choose what you're going to do next? Do you have a long list of things that you want to do, or is it quite spontaneous, really?
A bit of both. I've certainly got a long list. I've got an app on my phone which sort of ties with the other things I use, called Trello. And at any point in my life, whether it's 2 a.m. or whatever, when I'm out and about, and an idea comes from somewhere, often a lot of the good fans that we've got will chuck an idea and go, do you know about this or this? I'll pop it down on the app. I'll put any links relevant to it, and I'll then sort of rank ideas as to I've got a weird system where I say, all right, okay, how much am I going to enjoy that? How easy is it to film in terms of the visual? Could it be good? Is it sort of clickable? Will people other find this interesting? And sort of rank it and go, okay, so anything and anything. There's a list of about 80 things I'd like to do at the moment, which is great. So I'm a year ahead, at least.
Oh, that's good.
At least it sounds like you've got an organised mind, Paul. You know, which
easy, Tiger.
have some of that.
I'm not sure. I need the app, otherwise I'll forget stuff. That's for sure.
Well, do you know something I really wanted to ask you? Because, and in fact, a great example is your most recent film about the Dorset cursus that you just put up last weekend. That there's a hell of a lot of research went into that. How much? What was the actual process there? How long did it take you to get to that point where you knew how you were going to piece that together?
I say it's ideas kind of start maybe a year ago, or more, and I'll put some relevant links in that I found at the time. So if I see an academic paper or a newspaper article, anything that gives me that little notion of an idea, I'll stick that in that app and go, right, Dorset cursus, here's a couple of links. And then when the sort of time comes to go, actually, let's do that now, I guess I can sort of check back on those links, and I'll start with the meat and bones of it, sort of how I want to lay it, how I see the video sort of panning out over time. And I'll pick from that sort of the hook, the thing that captures everybody's sort of imagination. And that might be sort of after I've filmed. And just start writing a script, really. And it doesn't have to be an exact script, but it needs to be sort of a layout, so it sort of makes it easier for me to film on the day. I would say probably a day's work, let's say, maybe 8 or 10 hours will be researching and pulling the meat and bones out of it. And I try and, as you guys would do, is try and get a couple of academic papers in terms of what I can pick out as I think the cursus, I think it was dug in the 1950s by Atkinson, and again in the 1980s a bit more extensively, and that gave us loads. That gave me loads. And a few different theories. And of course, as I'm doing this and I'm taking pictures and I'm putting it online, other people go, oh, have you spoke to so-and-so? And it's almost too late. But actually, so you'll notice in that film, as I was editing the final bit, Dr. Wendy Morrison sort of flew in the face of one of the academic papers. And I was like, oh no, that's such a good point, what she said. And I had to just chuck that in ad hoc. I was in this studio and I had my phone, no camera, my phone. So I had to sort of, as I sit here now, post-edit, Dr. Wendy Morrison has said this, which makes so much sense. It sort of flies in the face of what they said in the 80s as a theory and what I sort of scripted.
It works well as a post-edit, though. I liked the way you slotted that in, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I need to include what she said. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah.
No. I was just sort of. I'll take notes from that, because the same thing. Because I'm working on a big thing that we did about Stonehenge. It's sort of it's a hefty edit. And of course, since we filmed, and there's been the new thing about the. You've done the thing about that as well. The altar stone having come from the Orcadian Basin. So I'm thinking, how are we going to slot that into this thing that we've already done? Anyway, that's our problem. We'll deal with it.
I think generally, archaeologists are a great bunch, and they. Dr. Wendy Morrison will always say to me, no, I'm just really happy you've asked. And she almost wants the sensible take, the modern sensible take. And that's a great thing. It's a really good thing, because I think, they're a great bunch, and they're just happy to sort of know that there's people out there that want to take archaeology seriously.
But I get you're happy to share the received opinion that's out there. But when you're filming, when you've done something, when you've edited it, after the event or during the event, do you find yourself, coming to independent conclusions? Because time after time after time, what happens, it happened, especially with Standing Stones. As Rupert I got to a site, and when you're actually at the place that is described in such and such a paper or in such and such a synthesis in a book somewhere, and you go, hang about, that's not what's here.
Yeah.
And I think you had that with the cursus one for a bit, but it's that thing where do you feel empowered to share your 2 cents worth in the face of
Yeah, it's good to be out and about in the landscape, and I think there's a lot of other sort of YouTube channels which, you guys Standing with Stones, you were everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And it's good to be there and get a sense of the landscape, get a sense of what the people that were building these monuments would have seen, would have considered. Yeah, I think so. But also I think that people don't necessarily like what you may conclude, which is, sometimes, let's take the Roman dodecahedron example. Not necessarily a landscape thing, but an object thing. And the conclusion... There's so many conclusions, but the conclusion in my head is ritualistic. But people, I think, very shy away from the word because they say, it's just an archaeologist's excuse that they don't know. And that's okay. But I feel we forget about the time we live in now and the time that people lived in back then. And it's a really obvious cliche thing to say, but we live generally comfortable lives. We kind of have a good sense of the future most of the time. And I think to not know what the future looked like and how you understood the future meant that you would do all kinds of things to sort of try and ensure that your future was going to be safe. So I think ritualistic is it's a conclusion that a lot of people don't like, but I think that it's easy to arrive there based on the potential huge hardship that we do know or we don't know that people would have had at the time, I guess.
I think that's the important thing, is that there's nothing wrong with coming to a ritualistic conclusion. No, I don't mean that. There's nothing wrong with coming to the conclusion that something was ritualistic. It's so long as it's not a lazy conclusion. When people find a site and because they don't know what it is, they just say ritual. If every analysis that you've carried out on it brings you to that conclusion, then it's as valid as anything else. It's just so long as it's not lazy, isn't it? Yeah,
that's very true, very true. But I do feel your point about the landscape and being there and seeing it is, I'll take for example the Dorchester Aqueduct. Me and Rebecca took a long walk along various sections of it, and there was still a big question mark. Was there this huge dam sort of a mile back, or did it come from the stream? And again, being there really gives you this sense of, yes, it was, we're talking a 2,000 year difference, but so to answer your question, Michael, we came to a conclusion that we really felt that it would have come from the main stream rather than being dammed off. I can't even remember why. I think it was because the tributary that would have fed the dam was tiny. the catchment area was tiny, and we're talking about a huge dam. But yeah, being there gave us that sense of no. Let's take this as our personal opinion. We may be wrong, who knows? But yeah. So yeah, I think being there definitely helps, and you can draw your conclusions.
Making a very good channel out of visiting places and sites that, for most people, fly under the radar quite a bit to a large extent. And that's fascinating, for people to find, oh, I didn't know that existed, or they didn't know that was there. Do you ever feel tempted to tackle Stonehenge or Avebury? I don't know if you've done Avebury.
We did an Avebury one.
Yeah.
Based on sort of an archaeological talk we watched. I can't remember for the life of me of the guy that we did. I do like the under the radar ones. Even the Dorset curse is a great example, because we've had so many lovely comments.
Yeah.
And we had someone that lived in Pentridge, which is half a mile from the northeastern end.
Right.
And they said, I've lived in Pentridge for 12 years. I didn't know this was there. And this is like half a mile in the field next door to your house.
Yeah.
And they said, thank you so much. I'm going to go and walk now and have a look.
Well, to the point, that was one of my fun things. Did you see the little number that I did walking out my back door a few years ago? And that there are 3 known curses.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's
going.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, on that subject, I guess I read an article which said there's about 60, but this is just in the UK. But again, this is something I didn't have time to research. How many more are there? Yeah,
Yeah, there's quite a lot more. I think there's actually about 60 in Scotland.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Some of them are quite small.
Far more in Britain. I genuinely think there's another one. I mean, if that was just within the a walkable distance.
Yeah.
If you look on this fascination with looking at Ordnance Survey maps and looking at the bumps and humps.
Yeah.
If you expand it, there's. I live in Barford now. There's one just up the road. There's a remains of a henge-form structure just up the road here.
Yeah. So Dr. Wendy Morrison
everywhere.
Yeah. So the early Neolithic. So we're talking almost sort of very early, almost pre-long barrows.
Right.
Now, Dr. Wendy Morrison believes that there is often an association with river confluences or river sources. Have you found that? Do you think am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, we could have a discussion about why we think that is so, and it would differ wildly depending on who was looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to sort of get into the weeds of this, but I think, Paul, you probably know where we're coming from. You've seen us witter about our thoughts about embankments and henges and stuff like that, and how, there was a penny drop moment way back then, when, and it's a question of, when you actually visit the site and you see the scale and the effort that's been put into something, and also you get the sense of, like at a big henge, of mounting the bank and then suddenly an arena opening up before you. The sense changes, and why would people put this effort into this putting it into an enclosure? There's a lot more going on here than just the driver of ritual is not enough to get this number of people to spend this amount of time to shift this amount of earth. That's not the right driver to look at. You've got to look at something much more fundamental, we thought. Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds.
But it's worth saying as well, though, that to give, you take, well, you can't say an average cursus, really, because they vary from like 60 yards long to absolute miles. You know, how long's the Dorset cursus? 6 miles, something like that.
6.25, yeah.
6.25 miles. And so to say that they're all processionary pathways, and you think, well, that's a very short procession. That's a very long procession. To give them all the same sort of, it is just silly, really.
And so often they crisscross each other as well.
Yes. Yeah. And it's amazing how they interact with the landscape and with other monuments. I mean, we were talking about Hindwell recently, which is the biggest palisaded enclosure known in Britain, anyway. And you have a cursus that just comes into the top section of it. You know, it's. If it is the livestock thing, then the notion of driving animals down a cursus and then into your enclosure makes complete sense. Anyway.
So I think it's probably the meat of this discussion is probably best shifted to another time and another place.
Yes.
We'll get bogged down with it otherwise.
Yes.
Man, the Folkton Drums.
Oh yes.
Oh, mind you, we're in danger of venturing down weedy paths.
Well, backtrack ever so slightly, because one of the things that I wanted to ask Paul, I mean, but it comes to the Folkton Drums. One of the things that I wanted to ask Paul is that, you know, we're very lucky, and I'm including the three of us here, in that because we're not inside the academic archaeological community, if you like, then we can say what we like without without any major ramifications. And so when people, I mean, you take anything like, you know, the stone balls or whatever it might be, I wanted to ask you if you had looked at any particular things and thought, no, that's just silly. Folkton Drums being one of those things, but a bit like, do you remember the spiked tripod that Mike and I did a piece on some years ago?
I don't actually, but feel free to remind me.
It's this spiked tripod, and it has a little bird's head on it.
I mean, they're long, they're spiky spikes.
They are long, dangerous spikes. Yeah. And the archaeologists, because it had a bird's head on it, the interpretation was that this is a child's toy. And I thought, what parent is going to give this three spiked object to their child? And
I mean, talk about treading on Lego on the carpet floor.
and we did actually say at the time, I think, well, this, the person who wrote this article clearly doesn't have children. But so that basically rolled on because seeing your film on the Folkton Drums, and just my major irritation about there's one of the interpretations. I think it was entirely put out by Mike Parker Pearson actually, but the fact that they're associated with children, and the reason that they're associated with children is that when the first three were found, they were in a child's grave.
Yes.
Now, they've only been found twice, so three of them found in this child's grave, and then one other one that's undecorated that was found in another context altogether. So they've only been found twice, even though there's four of them. And only one of those was related to children. So to actually say that they're related to children, no, they're not. It's like if your child liked banging a saucepan to make a lot of noise and you buried it with them because it was their favourite toy. To say that all saucepans are associated with children, it's the same sort of thing. So I just wanted to know what your take was on the Folkton Drums.
It's curious, isn't it? It's really curious because everything is associated then because of the age, Stonehenge. And so you see these articles, and they have this, these in particular had such a tenuous link to Stonehenge that I think, was it the Folkton or the Burton Agnes they'd found with a ball and a pin? And it's well, the link, is that there are some grave sites near Stonehenge which also have a ball and a pin. So therefore Stonehenge. And oh, God, goodness me. So, yeah, I saw an article which said about the whole child thing is one thing. Take the next theory from the same paper, which was the measuring devices. And when you read some of the articles, they sort of suggest that, okay, these are measuring devices, because if you take a long foot, 3.22 meters, well, they wrap perfectly round the largest one 7 times, the next size down 8 times, and then the smallest size 10 times. And you think, okay, that's quite compelling. On the face of it, that sounds really compelling. That's a huge coincidence. Yeah. So I went down this route with that in the back of my mind. Let's go open mind. Let's give all the context, a description, where they're found, the whole of this story. Get towards the end of this. Now, the academic paper was behind a paywall, and it was something like £65. And I said to Rebecca, oh goodness me, I really want to read this. Thankfully, a guy that's got another YouTube channel said, Paul, it's okay. I know you're doing this. I work for a university. Here's the paper. I shouldn't probably say this. It broadcasts this live, but anyway, somehow I got hold of this paper, so I read the paper, eagerly looking at all the details that I'd read before, and it turns out that wasn't the case at all. The largest drum was something like 7.12 times. Next size was 8.1. The next was, 9.8. I was like, well, that throws everything about the measuring, coincidence out of the window, because it wasn't as exact as we were led to believe. Yeah. And I just found that really frustrating. You were led to believe that on the face of this, in the sort of the abstract of the paper, wow, too much of a coincidence not to be true. But dig a little bit deeper, scratch the surface, and it's off the wall. It's just, so you do come across that, perhaps from a particular area rather than others, where things need to be associated with Stonehenge and a measuring device for circles, and a little bit disappointed in that one, a little bit. And I made such a mistake in that film, and I'll hold my hand up and say I made such a mistake in that film. I was trying to show what it looked like. Had some nice diagrams or pictures, and I showed this lovely profile view, and I showed a lovely plan view, and really sillily, and I hold my hands up big time here, I kind of married the two together as a nice graphic. I'll put the lid, you'll notice what I did, on top of the pot. I know it's a chalk object, I know it's a solid object, but because of the way I did this graphic, everybody said, oh, the lid goes on the pot. And my heart sinks, because everybody, and rightly, everybody says, oh, I think it must be for putting things inside. And it's entirely my fault that I'd done this silly graphic just to show how it looks. Yeah. And of course, I then sort of typed everywhere I could in the description, I'm really sorry, this is a solid object, not a pot. So I did.
You have the advantage. You have the advantage of having handled a replica there. Does that give you any further sense of function, purpose? Or?
Not with that. So I had a friend who made me a 3D printed model, ideally sort of same sort of shape and size. And that's okay. But do you know what helped the most was he did the same with the Roman dodecahedron. So he made a 3D, and I painted it like a bronze metallic. And my goodness me, do you know, here's the thing. So when I edit at home, I'm just sat editing away. I have the Roman dodecahedron often in my hand, and I'm just playing with it like this. Yeah. And it reminds me of what Alice Roberts said when she was, I think it was digging for Britain when they found one. Yeah. And she just said, just hold it in your hand. Just feel it. Just hold it. And she was just playing with it in her hand, just playing with this Roman dodecahedron. And she said, that feels really soothing, doesn't it? And I do the same thing now. Yeah. So it does help. Having a replica of something really helps. So if I can, I'll try and do that in a film, just to help me, if anything.
Absolutely. Oh, sidebar! Did you know? I was at the British Museum November, I think it was, doing a thing about Abu Huraira and that quernstone. The case very next case along in that room at the British Museum is where the Folkton Drums is. It's next door to the Abu Huraira quernstone.
They're there now, are they? Because they were down at Stonehenge for a while, weren't they? I think as like an exhibition.
I was surprised to see them there. Yeah. Because the last time I saw them was actually no, because the last time we saw them, Rupert, was in the Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum. Not at.
I think there's the Lavant drum associated or not, but the Lavant one I think is currently in Chichester.
Right.
Graham just mentioned beware the Levant drum. Sorry if that sounds a bit random if you're watching the recording of this. Our Patreon some of our Patreon supporters are watching the recording of this, and they've got comments in the side there. So the Levant drum. I didn't know about the Levant drum.
Well, it's
the undecorated one. Yes, you did.
Do I? Okay.
It's the fourth one, the one that was found on its own, that's completely plain.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Chalk Pit Lane, I think, obviously. Chalk Pit Lane down in West Sussex. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So, what's next? What's next, Paul?
We've got to finish that one off, though. What do we think they are?
Oh, what do we haven't got there yet, have we? All right, I beg your pardon.
I think they're weights.
Do you know, I'm so disappointed I didn't include that in the film, because one or two people emailed me afterwards and said, "Oh, you didn't consider weights," and I was like, "Yeah, I didn't. I really didn't, did I? Why not? Why not? Absolutely."
And yet nobody's tested for that. It seems. It's strange how this thing of wrapping rope round as a measuring thing sort of took hold and wouldn't let go. I mean, I thought it was bonkers from the start, because they're slightly, the sides are slightly tapered. So how
exactly.
Could you
so where do you put the tape? Yeah.
And anybody that's tried to wrap rope round a drum, you get into all sorts of problems. You know, it's like winding up the cord from the lawnmower in the garden. It never wraps, nice and cleanly like around the thing. It wraps over itself, and
Do you then count the amount of times you wrap the lawnmower cord around it and then measure out a stone circle? I don't know.
Yeah.
That way lies madness.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. So the short answer is we don't know, but nobody's done the measurement of the volume. I suppose we could do a back of the envelope calculation if we had the measurements, but
density of chalk. Does the density of chalk remain consistent? Probably. I guess.
Well, the volume's going to.
Displacement,
the density
volume,
doesn't.
Yeah. But anyway, nobody's done that work, so there's a challenge for somebody.
Well, as far as we know, you'd think somebody would have done one, but anyway.
Yeah. Or if there's a correlation, a ratio between the volumetric, their volumes, then there's a starting point, and nobody seems to have done that. Or maybe we just don't know. Hey ho. Shall we move on from Folkton Drums then?
Should we look at? There's a couple of comments that I thought actually Graham has said. Go walk the cursus monuments at Rudston. Walk them last year, and they interact with everything. Yeah, don't they though? Don't they though? That's one very confusing processionary set of pathways. That's true. And John had a question that we should chuck at you that we've actually brought up before. So, Paul, if you had a time machine, what single time or place might you visit to resolve as many questions as possible?
And
what answers might you seek?
That's such a tough question, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. I'm continually fascinated by sort of the tribes of Great Britain, Iron Age tribes of Great Britain. I love that era at the moment. That'll change in 2 weeks' time, and I'll be fascinated by something else. But I'd love to know more about. We know from coinage and we know from writing of the Roman sort of late Iron Age, but that's all we've got. And I'd love to know a little bit more about their interactions, because we see a hill fort, and we see, that was in the Durotriggers, that was in the Atrebates, that was in the Belgae area, but were they? Because we're talking. There's a sort of a potentially false association with the names of the tribes and the hill forts, which were by and large out of use by the time we get the names of these tribes. And I'd love to, I guess, sort of go back and bridge that gap of how did these tribes come about? What were they experiencing? I think we've got sort of writing from Pythias, maybe 300 BC, and he wrote that they seem like a lovely bunch. All they want to do is just trade. And I thought that's wonderful. So if I have to pin it down, let's go to 300 BC and see if Pythias was right. Were they a lovely bunch of people that just wanted to trade? And I think you referred to maybe a small island off of Great Britain where they used it as a place to store all their resources. And maybe he was talking about St. Michael's Mount or something like that. I don't know. But
so Pythias said that, did he? Okay.
I think Pythias said it. Well, Eratosthenes, if that's how you pronounce it, said that's what Pythias said, if that makes sense. So Pythias travelled up beyond Spain, France, landed in southern Britain somewhere, and called it the land of the painted people, Britannia. And I'd love to know more about that sort of 500 to 300 BC when we were starting to see a lot of hill forts. What were they all for? Just more about that area. And did we see the same tribal names then as we did 300 years later? And when they started making coins and started sort of stamping their names on things. And I'd love to know. I guess that would be probably my top choice, but goodness me, as with you gents, you could probably pick 100 different aspects and questions you'd love.
There's so many questions that you want answered, aren't there? You talking about the tribes, and Pythias or whoever, that another one that bothers me is that you get the writings of people like Hecataeus of Abdera, who talks about the Hyperboreans, and the Hyperboreans, that you read some sources and they say that it's just a mythological people. But then the more you dig for them, you find that, well, hang on, there's quite a few people who are talking about the Hyperboreans who lived in this island north of Gaul. And it's like, well, is that Britain? Or, it could be all sorts. But so you can say that, the Hyperboreans were real, but who were they? And you talking about different tribal names, do these overlap somewhere? And how can you need a time machine to find that out.
Yeah. Or a lot of archaeology, do we how do we get, question, how do we get more archaeology? How do we change our society to get more, as I think Mariana Hota once said, how do we make archaeology investable? And that's a good question, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's our time machine, I guess.
Yeah. I have to say, we're sort of guilty of shying away from the Iron Age a lot of the time ourselves. And I don't know if we've sort of done a deep dive on why particularly that is. I suppose it's because our starting point was the megalithic stuff and, Neolithic stuff. And of course, we start bumping heads with actual history when it comes to. I know it's way before the Romans came. They've got to deal with, but there's a sort of not sure. And of course,
I understand.
There's a kind of thing. Oh, if we go there, then this is going to open out into a whole new thing because there's actually a lot more known about the Iron Age, and there's kind of as generalists. Having called ourselves the prehistory guys, who do we think we are? Getting focused on a particular area, we know how that area tends to broaden out, and you can get bogged down and start getting bogged down in the detail, and you're off in the weeds, and I suppose so. We find ourselves picking off little bits here and there, And the downside of that is the next week after we've done something, we've forgotten said what we thought. Any information we've taken on is gone.
I know the feeling so well, Michael. I know the feeling so well. People say, "What video did you do last week?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I cannot remember 2 days ago."
I can't tell you. It's something that has happened quite a few times for us. Is that we've been researching something, and and it's happened both ways. I've said to Mike, we're researching something. Oh, did you know about such and such? Mike goes, yeah, we did a film about that, and we, and I've done the same thing the other way around, and we'll say to each other, did we? And you go looking back over the last 7 years or whatever. Oh yeah, don't remember a damn thing about it. But
completely. But
and of course, our patrons and our subscribers, they know. They remember better, way better.
Yeah.
But surely that's when you did that. You said, Michael, you said that about that.
Yeah.
What?
Oh.
Who was that person?
Yes.
It's scary. I put it down to the fact that we and you do a lot of different things. So we can forgive ourselves because we put out a film, a day later we're researching the next thing. Filming the next thing, writing the next thing. So we can forgive ourselves, can't we?
Look, I know we've got enough on your plate, just dealing with stuff within Britain. Have you ever thought about doing stuff abroad, or have you? Maybe I'm not sort of done a deep dive enough into it.
I kind of think like you've mentioned your area or let's say time period is more megalithic, Neolithic, whatever.
Yeah,
and you guys obviously stretch content wherever it be. I guess I'm number one. I'm not a great traveller. Number two, I guess I've.
What you mean? You get car sick or what?
I mean, I get. Let's say I get flying sick. So step across the water would be a big thing for me. It takes some big event for me to sort of cross the sea in whatever form that takes. So I kind of think, do you know what? I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm very generalistic. So I'll just anything that falls into my net in this. I can get in a car and I can drive myself there and point at something. That's generally where I lie. But maybe one day. Never say never. But I'll need to sort of conquer a few traveling fears. Let's say.
Fair enough.
But I kind of envy you in a way. The confinement. That you are confined because I think. Once we started raising our eyes above the parapet and started looking abroad, our minds were blown. Because one thing, I don't know if you're aware that we've pointed this out, that on the continent, we've got stone stuff, and Brittany aside, we've got stone stuff, but we've very little of the evidence of people living their lives. Compared to on the continent, where they've got loads of remains, far more proportionally, remains of villages and houses and huts, for whatever reason.
It does sort of concern me that if I did the same as you and started raising, we do a lot on Roman roads because I'm just fascinated with the idea of the route. So I kind of think, okay, I know quite a bit now about Roman roads, but then somebody says, yeah, but what about the such and such in France, in Italy? And I'm like, you know what? I am being too. I'm putting myself in this little box of Britain, and not really considering what I should be considering. And as you say, I think if I sort of raise my eyebrows over the sea, I'd sort of scare myself with how much I don't know at all. Actually, I'm just
don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Although I have to say that of the places that we've travelled to, when you start looking at Eastern Europe, and you look at the extraordinary amount of archaeology, where exactly as Mike just said, that where you've got we were at a conference a few years back, and there were some archaeologists over from Eastern Europe, but particularly Romania. who were just talking about their most recent excavations. And they were almost blasé with the numbers of, we found 50 houses here and 150 houses here, and we excavated 30 here. And you think, well, Britain, you don't find any houses, like one or two, and Skara Brae.
Must farm.
Or must farm. And you think, in Britain, there's just hardly anything. And yet in Eastern Europe, it's just everywhere. And yet nothing monumental. Particularly, and it's the for me it's that crossover where what we have in Britain is everything is so enigmatic, and as soon as you go out of Britain, then everything is so much more down to earth. And I have to say I like that. I do like that.
I was reading the paper, very complicated paper that I didn't really understand completely, on the DNA, mitochondrial DNA, the paternal versus maternal. That came out of the Juro.
What do you mean you didn't understand it, Paul? What's the problem?
It was quite heavy, wasn't it? Goodness me. But that's a great example of what you're saying, because Duropolis, the settlement there, how rare was that to find such a sort of complete settlement with 49 graves or whatever it was? And it sort of underlines your point. This is probably very normal.
Which one was Duropolis?
Michael, help me out. Juro Triggers, Dorset.
We did a thing on it, Rupert. The female.
Here we go.
We're talking about the discovery that they're not. It's not matrilineal, is it? That the society was.
It was
matriarchal.
Yeah,
matriarchal. Yes, more matriarchal. That's not the word though that they use, because there's a specific word to describe what they mean. That the descent is. It was the men that were going. The women were staying in their family places, and it was the men that were moving about, rather than the women when they're married going to the men's houses. Is that correct? Or
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
So there was one particular line.
Rupert's still looking puzzled.
No, it's because I'm thinking. Well, that's not what I was thinking. Of course, that's not matriarchal at all. That's I was
exactly.
That's
something
completely different.
But so the I think they found a number. I can't remember. 80% of people
matrilineal. Nelly, thank you.
Went back to one specific female, maybe 300 years previous. But the point being, though, Rupert, was it underlines your example that the settlement that all of that research came from was very rare, and yet it was a number of houses, not a huge area, but wow, what an amazing site for the UK.
And it's that, even when you've got as much evidence in the ground on these things on the continent, the thing that we forget, or archaeologists, is that forget that our view of the past is so myopic and so through a little pinhole of the evidence that we have. I think it's a point we try to make over and over again, is that people were everywhere doing lots of stuff, and they were busy. The fact that there are stone circles are only here, there, and everywhere is completely belies the fact that people were trading, moving about, and being very busy, because that's what human beings do in order, if they're going to survive in any number. They've got to be busy. And our interpretations based on the little pinhole view that we got is sometimes you got to think, it's absurd to make any conclusion at all about how people were operating. Maybe.
And yet we do.
But it's got to be done. It's got to be, you've got to have a narrative.
I'm eternally haunted, though, by the fact that that archaeology, by its very nature, is dealing with what's left. And on the basis that successful settlements just get bigger over time, that means that we've lost all the archaeology that's underneath places like London or any of the major cities where the settlements would have people we've found Neolithic bones in the in the Thames, for goodness sake. And so all that is lost. And how much, if we could, there you go, there's another reason for a time machine. If you could go back to the Thames Basin, back in the Neolithic, then what we would see then, would that change our current view of archaeology as a whole of that time period? Because it's what we have left could very well be giving us a very skewed idea of what whether it's population densities or what people were up to. Don't know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, yeah. And I guess things like that, lost and gone, huge developments during the 60s, 70s, when we didn't really care too much for archaeology. Even in my local area, I could give you countless sites which are just so disappointing that was lost. And I quite agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've heard firsthand in instances of where with property development that a lot of the time, so that they're making a new housing estate and they find they uncover something, so they have to call in the archaeologists and then everything is stopped while the archaeology is done. And we've been told directly about the amount of times that people have said, just don't say a word, just carry on digging. Because the developers are under there's clauses that termination clauses or whatever they call them. They have a deadline. There's penalty clauses if they don't meet the deadline, so they just don't say anything, and
not surprised
knows how much has been lost.
But also, not surprised at all to hear that. But also, even, and again, I won't mention any names, but sort of stories of finding the cheapest contractor in terms of archaeology to do the quickest job, and again, sort of brush over certain things. I've definitely heard a few horror stories. But there's a lot that I'd love to see improved. I'm considering almost making a little film actually about sort of how can we improve archaeology? How can we make it, repeating the words, how can we make it investable?
It's funny that, I mean, the next question I had in my mind is, have you ever felt tempted to push back, to make a point about pushing back, whether it's, archaeology itself, or indeed the amount of pseudo archaeology there is about, do something corrective, rather than,
I'd love to be able to do that with the right balance, without sounding like I'm trying to bash any archaeologist specifically.
Isn't it?
It's a fine line, isn't it? I really would like to say, come on, guys, let's move forward. And in the same breath, address pseudo archaeology, because there's so much out there that's just, and it creeps into people's minds in an innocent way. I went and watched a talk from Dr. Alex Langlands on Wansdyke, and somebody innocently asked a question at the end. Oh, I've heard it was for a canal. And, Dr. Alex Langlands dealt with it very professionally, and no, that's not the case. But there's a whole person out there that says every ditch, every dike, every hill fort was a canal, because this person in the audience had read this in good faith,
yes, of course,
and asked this question like it was a possible consideration. And I think, archaeology needs to play a part in, I don't know what the part is, but it needs to play a part in sort of getting on top of this. We've probably all seen the whole Hancock and Flint Dibble going on to Joe Rogan, and it's difficult to watch, because it's, what's out there for us to understand and learn is so much more exciting. There's so much that we could do by doing some good archaeology compared to making stuff up. There's just, I I don't know. You're with me. I know you're with me, but I'm just
totally.
Yeah. And I think archaeology needs to play a part in that in a bigger way. You know, I don't know.
It does. And in fact, Tim Darvill, bless him, we miss him. The late great Tim Darvill. He said, he was very vocal about the fact that archaeology and archaeologists, apart from the very, the minority of commercial setups, but archaeology as a whole, it's paid for by the public. Whether if it's university based, whatever it is, it's paid for one way or another by the public. And he thought that really archaeology had a responsibility to get this information out there to a wider world, which is why he really liked what we were doing, and he probably loved what you're doing. But because of that, because all we're trying to do is get the facts out there to people, because the facts are really exciting. And going off on one and making up stories doesn't make stuff more exciting.
No.
It's
Anyway, it's the advice is don't step in that. Actually, I asked you if you felt tempted to, push back. It can get vitriolic. We got a lot of pushback. When
I've got enough to do, I think, for the moment.
It is extraordinary how we were doing a lot of stuff on on the TEPE sites, GÖBEKLI TEPE in particular, and oh, good grief, the amount of venom that was poured in our direction because we were not talking the nonsense that Graham Hancock was talking. And it's extraordinary. To be honest, we're kind of glad that we're not rooted in that arena, if you like, because even now there's stuff, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's stuff going out even now that is touting information, like the deliberate burial of some of the sites, for example. That archaeology, jury's out. It's not true, and yet people are still pushing this as a thing, and it's you completely colour the whole potential history of it. All the facts that you could extract. You're just completely destroying that by maintaining something that isn't so. It's very frustrating.
So the question is, how can archaeology and communicators like us sort of come together to make a bigger noise is the wrong word, make a bigger noise is the wrong phrase, but how can you make archaeology more exciting, accessible? The Folkton Drums example is a great example, having to pay £65 to read an article that was only about 20-25 pages long. Maybe that's one of many things that we need to talk about, perhaps. I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe. The worst one that I had was there's a henge, the oldest henge in Britain, whose name I can never remember, but it's up in it's in Scotland anyway, and it has a drove road running right through the middle of it, which and I loved this because the fact that it is just the phosphate levels when they did tests on this henge, the phosphate levels were off the charts. So much animal husbandry going on in there, and so there was this thing behind a paywall of Nature magazine journal, and so I paid for it because I really wanted to know this. And basically, it was one single page that didn't really say, it didn't really say any more than you already knew. But I had to pay good money for that. Honestly, and as you say, that doesn't help information get out to the wider world at all.
That could be exciting.
Do you think there's a really dangerous trap? And I think, we're tempted to fall into it. I don't know, where you stand on it and what your practice is. But when you've got something that's, maybe a bit niche or a bit under the radar, or people have never heard of it, And the default position for so many folk in the media is, if they can possibly do it, relate it to Stonehenge, or relate it to Stonehenge, or
Yeah.
or relate it to Stonehenge in some possible way, you know. Whether it's a chronological link, or it's a similarity link, or a topology link, or just any link they can think of. And, you know, I kind of, we do it. But, you know, the upside of that is probably getting people to click through more often, and look at stuff. But this is a thought that's, you know, just occurred in this conversation. Is that actually very damaging? Because I think it's something we tried to make out in our last thing, just this last thing we did about the discovery in Denmark, you know, where the archaeologists themselves, it wasn't the PR, you know, it wasn't the PR department, it wasn't the media saying it. Oh, we found a Stonehenge-like circle in Denmark, and we have to pop and say, no, you haven't.
Yeah, I love the opening of that, where Rupert, I think you said something like, it says Denmark and it says wood. That's it, or something like that.
Circle,
yeah. That's perfect.
The point is, swings and roundabouts. If you left the thing at its face value, and, you know, new discovery, timber circle, would that get people more interested in the thing for what it is, rather than having it sort of coloured with this sort of mystical or link to something that they already know? I don't know.
It's lazy. One. It's lazy. We've got an imagination that's better than grabbing Stonehenge as the only clickbait title we've probably got. We need to do better, don't we? If that's all we've got. I don't mean us. I mean we, as communicators. You know, I'm often accused. Not often. People say, "Well, it's a clickbait title. It's a clickbait title." I mean, welcome to YouTube, but it's not. It's legit bait. That's my phrase. Yeah. Legit bait. Because
well done.
I'm offering.
Hold on while I write that down. We'll use that.
Write down, I'm offering what my title says, without doubt. I'm never going to sell you something that I'm not.
Yeah.
And I try not to use Stonehenge because it doesn't always do well, but it's not needed. There's so much, and this goes back to our conversation about making archaeology and this more exciting. I think we need to do better than that article you guys saw, for example. We can do a lot better because, I don't know, we don't need to rely on Stonehenge. Just because everybody knows its name, there's other ways of doing things. There's other ways of grabbing people's attention in a positive and exciting and accessible and, I don't know, many other words, a way of doing things, you know?
Well, I think you do a good job of that, actually, though, because you're straight down the line with the stuff that you do. You don't, you know.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, and you do it in such a, you know, entertaining way, you know, because you come across wonderfully on the, you know, and you've got a vibe going, and you don't hang about.
And it has to be said, you keep a good pace as well. Yes. And that's not always easy.
I think if people tell you to slow down, then that's a good thing. If people told you the opposite, that's a bad thing. Because I think if people told you to slow down, if people told you to speed things up a bit, then there's a lot of people that won't say that and they'll click away. So I think if you keep a good pace, you hook them at the start, you give them the little bit of information that's, look at this, then that's the sort of the secret to YouTube.
I think we took all our cues from, you know, the great David Attenborough, I think. So we started off, but we started off at quite a ponderous pace, but there's something about that in the long form that has its place as well. But it's not. Of
course it does.
But it doesn't make us good YouTubers.
Yeah,
it makes nice filmmakers, but
100%. I always say, I try and say, I make films and then I put them on YouTube. I don't make YouTube videos. But that's a lie, because I do make YouTube videos, because I
it's a good distinction though. Yeah.
Yeah, but a great example, and I think I mentioned to this you recently, Rupert, is your Roll Right Stones. That film is such a good film. It taught me how to storytell, right? Because it's a beautiful story.
Bless you.
I'll have to put the link up there now.
You wrote it, you filmed it. But the point is, it's such a good story about Roll Right Stones telling us more about what we want and believe now than what we know about the place. But the point is, it didn't do well on YouTube. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous, because you made it into a good cinematic, lovely looking film. YouTube says, "Oh, well, you haven't given us a hook straight away. You haven't given us what you're doing straight away. You haven't ticked all the YouTube boxes." That film should be getting 200, 300,000 views, because it's a great film. It's a great story. But YouTube says, nah, you haven't followed the rules. And that's ridiculous. I could rant about YouTube for a long time, gents. But I won't.
Yeah.
But you get the idea.
Absolutely. But it's
frustrating.
It's the picadillos of the YouTube audience. I think the algorithm just chases how the audience is behaving. So you know.
So I try and combine the two these days. I try and combine the love of making a half decent film, and also trying to get the views in, because why not try and get the views in? So yeah. So what's next? What ambitions? What would you really love to do? I mean, is it just a continuing for you, or is there a sort of far horizon goal? I love what I do. I really enjoy doing this. I hope that sort of comes across. That's the goal, to make that continue to. So continue what I'm doing, but I'd love to. I mean, the bigger picture is to some way help the archaeological community be perceived in a better way. Like, going back to the conversation we were talking about, I'd love to be able to sort of play just a small part in trying to make archaeology more accessible to the masses, and somehow make it more investable, and somehow make it a really sort of more, I don't know, I'm not saying we should just trash the landscape and dig trenches everywhere, but bring it to the public's attention more. The history, I live in a town called Andover, and everybody slates Andover, and yet it is covered in history. We've got Roman roads, ancient trackways, pilgrim routes, Harrow Way. So much going on, but everybody hates it because there's no Primark and there's no whatever. But if people just understood for a second what's here for them to explore, to go and show their kids this hill fort that's there and the hill fort that's there, all these wonderful things. And I think people love it when you shove it in their face, but they until they look for it and see it. And I'd love to be able to sort of bring it to the masses a bit more. Not hey, I'm Paul Whitewick, look at me, but more of a right. Look at this. Look at the archaeology. Look at the history that's on your doorstep. And you would love it, and your kids would love it, and you'd be engrossed in it, and you'd learn about it. And then in 2 generations' time, or 1 generation time, we'd have this whole bunch of, people that are really interested in learning more. That's
the way to.
It's interesting, though, going back to what you were saying right at the beginning, when you said, as a kid, that you used to look for stuff on the map and go, oh, let's go and have a look at that then.
Yeah.
What astonished me more recently is you start looking at the LiDAR of Britain, and particularly around where you are, the amount of stuff in the landscape you can't see it in the landscape, but it shows up on LiDAR. The amount of prehistory that is still just aching to be uncovered is extraordinary. Tech.
Yeah.
Maybe one way to look at it is to say that we're in the heritage business, because that is what turns people on. when they can relate to the place that they live, where they've got roots. And that's, I think, really turns people on, is when they discover that the place they have roots in their own lives, in the brief time around where we live, being connected to it is so important. I think it's actually a huge missing for a lot of people, a real connection with where they live or they've decided to settle down. It's so important, and maybe slotting into that heritage niche, as it were, is part of the picture of what we try to do. I don't know. Yeah.
So I guess that would be the ultimate long term. Yeah, growing the channel and enjoying it is part of the fun. But I think the long term to somehow play a part in that would be very wholesome.
All right. Predictable question. What is your favourite site in Britain that you've visited?
Oh, that's do you know, I wrote a load down before, because I thought I want to. Do you know, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you don't remember what you did last week. Do you know? I guess I don't really have if I could drive somewhere now and go and see something, it would be really mundane. I think everybody would go, "Oh, okay." I thought you were going to say an amphitheatre as some, but I love just standing on an old bit of an agger of a Roman road. I love just in middle of nowhere. I don't have to go to Silchester or go to Bath or go to wherever. Yeah. I love just going somewhere where there's a bit of an agger of a Roman road that you can still see really clearly in the landscape, and just sort of appreciating what passed on that route, of whatever era. Yeah, something so sort of subtle. Just, I guess that would be go and find a lovely bit of Roman road, because there's plenty about, and just stand on it and just look either way.
Nice answer.
Yeah. And it completely resonates with what basically turns us on. Actually, it's not the monument itself. It's when there's evidence, when you can connect with the people that built it, or you can imagine stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Have you done Thornborough Henges?
No. Yeah, you did. Yes, you have.
Thornborough.
Yeah,
Thornborough.
You did a thing on Thornborough, didn't you?
No, I don't think so.
The triple henge thing up in Yorkshire.
No.
Do you know what? No, I apologise. No, it was somebody else.
Put it on your list.
I will.
I think you'd enjoy that.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to it. There's not only is the prehistory to it, but there's a background to it in terms of its preservation and all that kind of thing. The local gravel companies and all that kind of. Oh, another one you must go to is the Druids. Stony. Rupert, help me out. Oxford, near Oxford.
Stony Littleton.
No, not Stony Littleton.
You said Stony. What?
No, not Stanton. Sorry, Stanton Harcourt.
Yes, Stanton Harcourt, the Devil's Quoits.
Yeah.
Wonderful
place.
place.
This for a long time. I've passed it many times. Going, I need to. I haven't got time. But
Yeah.
Yes,
I remember. Most impressive.
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
because it was an airfield. That it's now a restored henge and stone circle. And there was an airfield going through it not that long ago. Who
Do you know what?
It was,
we were talking to Dennis Harding. We were interviewing Dennis Harding only a couple of weeks ago for Callanish Conversations. And Dennis, somebody that Dennis knew, was actually in the Air Force and used Stanton Harcourt as a runway. You go there now and it's, they've put it back together again as a... its original circle, but Dennis actually knew someone who was flying in and out of that.
Wow,
well, it's just amazing when you can, it's like 6 degrees of separation, isn't it? That you know somebody who knows somebody, and amazing.
But you've got a great story there of the cooperation between the gravel company that owns the land and the local archaeologist in putting aside the land so that it could be reconstructed.
Yeah.
So there's all that. Yeah. So we trundle on. I think there would be masses more for us to talk about if we had the time, and I'm sure we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah. Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Not to.
Yeah, but it seems for the moment that we've covered a number of bases, and I hope everybody that's watched this will have found it interesting. And if you're not already a fan of or subscribed to Paul, please go and do so. You will be rewarded.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, many hours of viewing to be had.
Excellent. Any more wrapping up you need to do, Rupert?
I don't think so. Click the like and subscribe, folks. Help us out.
That.
We're nearly at 100,000.
Yeah.
Paul's way ahead of us on that score.
Yeah.
But no, that's it. Hope you've enjoyed it. And it's good chatting to you, Paul. It's
thank you.
overdue.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, if I can get down your neck of the woods, I should actually be passing Andover at some point this year. So I'll give you a shout
when you are.
We'll have a beer.
We'll do that.
Yeah,
definitely.
All right.
Thanks for watching, guys. That's it for now.
Take care,
That's
folks.
A wrap. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.